Hello， 大家好，我是阿关。阿关在欧洲也差不多待了4-5年了。作为点子新闻特派员，我跟点子新闻讨论说还能拍什么主题。我们是希望能拍比较有国际观的主题。如果大家喜欢这类的主题的话，可以帮我们按赞、留言、加分享。那今天呢，我鼓起勇气报名了后面这个 ASER 阿瑟。这个阿瑟研究中心，它是专门研究国际司法、欧盟法等等的专业中心。它平常有很多会议的主题。我们今天来到的主题是欧盟作为一个区域性组织，就让我们看下去吧。Hello， 大家好，我今天邀请到的是赫尔辛基大学的教授，他的主修是国际法律。Okay, so hello, Professor John Klember.Hi. Okay, so the first question. In the field of international law and policy formulation between countries and international organizations, what challenges are currently being faced, especially in dealing with relationships involving non-member countries?
Well, the non-member countries idea is not very helpful here. There are a bunch of challenges that we all know, I guess. Climate change is a huge challenge.Security at the moment is a huge challenge in Ukraine, in Israel, and Gaza, in Yemen, in Eritrea, in Saudi Arabia, and you name it. Everywhere in the world there are security issues. International organizations cannot do very much. The pandemic was also an example of that. International organizations cannot do very much because they have not been given the powers to do very much.There are some exceptions, like the Security Council, but the Security Council, as everyone also realizes, is usually paralyzed by one state or another invoking the veto. And other organizations simply lack the powers. Not even the World Health Organization can take binding measures when there's a pandemic. It can just say, there is a pandemic, better be careful. And do what you think you should be doing as a state. So those challenges...we use international organizations to talk about them. We use international organizations to collect information, to spread information, to collect statistics and data, and to be a forum for talking and negotiating, but not so much for decision-making. So we should not expect international organizations to be of much help there, whether with member states or with non-member states, because they're simply not set up to take action that way.Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. The next question is, during some incident involving countries to countries, does RIO have the opportunity to collaborate non-governmental organizations to achieve common goals?
In principle, yes. It depends a bit from organization to organization. Some are open to explicit participation with NGOs. Others have NGOs as observer members. There's some 1,200 or so observers to the United Nations. Many of them are NGOs. So they can be involved in all sorts of things and conversations. But again, not so much in decision-making because there is no active decision-making going on because we have not given the competences to do that to the organizations. But yes, NGOs are often considered as part of the solution, and rightly so, because they do represent something which is otherwise missing. If you just have states and state governments, then you're missing part of what makes society move. And that part is then represented possibly by civil society organizations, by NGOs. So yes, their participation is helpful, is necessary, is much needed. One has to be careful because not all NGOs are equally reliable, perhaps. Some are a cover for state interests, some are a cover for business interests. So one has to be a bit careful there. But in principle, sure.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. That was fun.
好，我们现在邀请到阿姆斯特丹大学的副教授Sebastian。Hello.
Hello.
Okay, so the first question is, can RIO help with regional peace, including national security, for countries that are not part of this region or are not members?
Thank you very much for the question, which is a very interesting one. And I would say there would be some potential indeed to stabilize the region and to have peace in the region, because if a big country, let's say a country which is aggressive in its foreign policies, is integrated in a regional organization, there are, of course, other countries in this regional organization which gain some leverage on this country. So let's assume, for example, it would not have been Russia invading Ukraine, but it would have been Poland invading Ukraine, the neighbor side, the neighbor on the other side of the country. In such a very hypothetical situation, of course, the other European Union member states would have intervened into that and would have taken action against Poland. But for that, you need Poland to be integrated in the regional organization. So indeed, I think that regional integration has a stabilizing role for regions, for the regional member states themselves, but that may even produce positive spillovers to countries which are not yet or will never be members of that regional organization.
Okay. Thank you so much. When EU is dealing different incidents, how to solve the problems as RIO, does it have enough influence to bind each other?
Yeah, the European Union is, of course, what we know it as the strongest international institutions on the globe, and it has indeed a surprising force to make member states to comply with the rules which are decided at the regional level. It comes to its boundaries when we think about when countries, for example, try to change their legal systems or disrespect human rights. Then the European Union has some problems, but they start to become much more active there now by withdrawing payments to such countries and making the payment of transfers basically conditional on the compliance with regional norms. And I think behind all that, why the European Union is so strong is it's such an important regional market. For none of the member states, it is rational to leave the regional organization, and that means to some degree they need to subordinate themselves under the rule of the European Court of Justice.
我们现在邀请到的是 Thomas Muller， 他是维也纳欧盟基本权利机构的法律研究员。So the first question is how to deal with pressure from other governments or exert pressure on specific countries to maintain a balance in global governance.
There's always a gray zone since international diplomacy, pressure in itself, it's not unlawful, and that exists different forms of pressurization. Soft power is form of a pressure. So I think for me it's hard to specifically answer that with regard to a regional integration organization, since I think this applies across the board, no matter whether the target of that pressure is just a simple country or a regional integration organization or a member state of that regional integration organization. Legally speaking, what is allowed, what is not allowed is the same. Again, the starting point is the UN Charter, which prohibits the intervention to domestic affairs. And I can't really elaborate more on that.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. The next question is, RIO holds significant influence in global governance. What diplomatic or policy recommendations can be given to countries striving to protect their territorial security and cultural identity? Does the RIO model apply in such cases?
As far as I know, if just we take the EU example as a Rio as the best developed example, to my best knowledge, the EU has never exerted the pressure which would jeopardize the territorial integrity or territorial security of another state. Maybe there are examples by others, I am not aware of any. The cultural identity, it's hard to assess, since of course some forms of soft power exercised by a Rio, like the EU, can touch upon elements of cultural identity in a given country. If we talk about like exporting of Western values, exporting of Western way of life in other regions of the world which do not necessarily follow the Western patterns, then it can happen. But how to give recommendations to counter that, I'm sorry, I'm not really trained, and this goes beyond my competence. But yeah, that's all I could say.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
No further.